Attention all S4 attendees. We are excited to announce that Industrial Defender will be sponsoring the conference, and we invite you to join us for a happy hour on Monday, February 13th from 4 to 6 p.m. This is a great opportunity to meet the Industrial Defender team, enjoy some drinks and demos, and have some good conversation. Badge pickup starts at 4 p.m. Monday, so grab your badge and then swing by our Prime sponsor room to join us for a fun start to the week. That's Monday, 4 to 6 p.m. in our Prime sponsor room. See you in Miami. Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity. 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Hey, Debbie, thank you so much for taking time today. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and what is Cloud Range?
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having me. Love your podcast. Yeah, so Cloud Range is a cyber readiness platform. You all may have heard of the phrase cyber range. We have taken the concept of a cyber range and turned it into a true training and readiness solution for customers. And this all came about because, as you're probably aware, there's such a grave talent shortage in cybersecurity. And it's not just that there are hundreds of thousands of open seats in cybersecurity, but the people who are already in cybersecurity are really only as good as the experience that they have. And so people need to do continuous training. Obviously, the threats change all the time, and we can't depend on the learning and training that people had before. And so it's a continuous process. And so we basically exist to accelerate experience and increase readiness in organizations.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. So how did you get into this? Like, what is your background? What did you do before Cloud Range?
Well, a lot. So I'm kind of a consummate entrepreneur, but my career started in the mid 90s, actually in the technical education space.
Okay. Back
when, and you'll remember these days, when people would get certifications to be a CNE or an MCSE, those types of certifications were very useful and still are for somebody to get a job and continue to do a job.
Yeah.
You know, there may be some continuous training after ongoing updated training after that. But for the most part, somebody got one of those certifications and they can do a job. And now, you know, I come full circle in my career after I founded and sold a few different companies in the technology arena. And when I founded Cloud Range, I knew that the cyber skills shortage was even more grave than just the technology skills shortage in general. And that the way that people had to have continuous training was very different than in the old days. And when I started my career, when people just needed to get a certification, that's not enough anymore. That's just table stakes these days. And we also know that as much as security leaders are trying to find that purple unicorn of a talented person, they don't exist. There's just a finite amount of people, and people, so we have to really create more of a talented workforce in cyber and upskill the people who are already in cyber. And then, of course, as it comes to OT, make people aware and train them that their job actually is cyber. Even though they may not realize that.
Wearing multiple hats. Yeah. It's funny because, I CCNA and MCSE, all of those tags and certifications I had, and I'd get those certifications to then be able to apply for a job, but I had no experience in those things. So, we would, back in the day, we'd call those paper MCSEs, right? You'd go get your certification, and because if you read the book and you could pass the test, but you may not understand or have ever actually logged into a Active Directory or Exchange or Microsoft Server, you may have no hands-on experience. So tell me how this is different and why you're not going to have a whole bunch of paper certified folks with zero experience.
Yeah. So there's really three elements of learning and knowledge, skills, and abilities. So very basic concepts. And if you talk about think about those old types of certifications. There's knowledge, you read the book, and maybe there's some lab exercises, some sort of little step-by-step exercises that you may do on some VMs. But for the most part, there's no true experiential learning. Like you said, there's no context. Nobody really knows, where does this thing exist? Where do we apply this knowledge and skills? And so then the third thing is abilities. So you have knowledge, skills, and abilities. And the abilities is really how people apply what they learn. We use sports analogies all the time. You may have heard me say this before, but knowledge is the rule book to baseball. Skills is how to throw a ball or how to pitch or how to slide. Those are individual skills, but that doesn't make you good at a job. That doesn't tell a coach that you can play on that team and win a game.
Sure.
And so you have to be able to practice as a team and win the game.
Right.
And cyber is a team sport. And so as much as people have knowledge and skills, that is not going to get them a win. They need abilities, and that's the experiential learning part that has to mimic exactly how they would perform in a job. And so that's the gap that's been missing that we've been able to fill, is taking knowledge and skills, applying them in a simulation environment on our cyber range, so that people can actually practice on defending against cyber attacks, because you don't want to do it when they're really happening. It's like flying a plane for the first time in the air. You don't want to do it. You want to practice on a flight simulator. So that's what we do differently, or I should say in addition to, because we're not replacing the knowledge and the skills that people still need and the certifications. This is to actually bridge that gap between those and their ability to perform a job.
Yeah. I mean, before this, it was, tabletop exercises, going over on paper and theorizing what it may look like. But that was the best that from an experiential perspective, that's the best that you could do until it happened. So talk about what does a scenario look like? Like what would a user or an end user expect, and what the experience be like?
Yeah, so our range is a very realistic emulation of both an IT and an OT network. And so, there's dozens and dozens of VMs in there. There's PLCs and HMIs, and there's representations of all sorts of different pieces of the OT environment and the IT environment and the whole network.
Right.
And then we design and build attacks that are scripted. So there's not a human that's the red teamer in these exercises. That's actually scripted so that in fact it happens.
Right. So that
the defenders actually have something to look for and look at. We do also red team versus blue team with humans on both sides, but that's another service. But when they log in, they're seeing, if they're in a SOC, they're going to see the same tools that they would see in their own SOC. They're going to see their SIM and their EDR and everything else. And then they're going to have access to the OT environment as well. And it really depends on the organization and how they're structured, but they are seeing live traffic. They're seeing live alerts. And there may be, 5 or 10 people in an exercise at one time, and each of them has a different role, and they're seeing stuff happen. It's not like you mentioned tabletop exercise. This isn't just a description on a PowerPoint deck of somebody saying, okay, this happened, what will you do? They don't actually know what happened. And that's the big difference here. Have you ever done an escape room?
Yep.
It's the same idea, is that you don't even know what you're looking for. You're just in this room and you're kind of waiting for something to happen. You don't know what's going to be, because that's how it happens in real life. And so they have to have critical thinking skills. They will gain situational awareness on what to look for. And then over the course of several hours, they're working through the detection and investigation. And obviously how that happens on the OT side is very different than, a traditional data attack, because the decisions have to be different and how they're handled. But they're going through all that, but it's a safe environment. They can't break anything. If they mess something up, we can reset the environment. But it is amazing how enlightened people are during and after the exercises, because they say, oh my gosh, I've heard of that concept, but now I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
or I didn't even know that things can happen that way, and I just watched it happen.
Yeah.
So they're able to really have much more context of what the attackers can do and are doing, and not just in their siloed role,
Sure.
but how it affects the rest of the organization. And that just makes people that much more effective.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, and you talked about a team, and I love that, and I think that's missing in a lot of the conversation around cybersecurity and OT and all of this, right? Is it's not just one person. There's not a product that I can buy that's going to be the silver bullet. There's not a person that I can hire. There's not a consulting company or there's no one thing I can do to fix all of the problems.
Right. Right.
And when I'm a technical person and I have a networking background or a firewall or I learned Palo Alto or Fortinet or whatever the capability is, when I'm taking those certifications, even, or I'm my daily job is creating rules. It's normal administration of that. It's not how to prevent or how to respond when there's an incident going on. That's not my normal day. My normal day is creating a firewall rule or disabling one. I'm not normally practicing, oh gosh, something bad happened.
Right. But also, to add to that is a lot of people know how to write a firewall rule, but they don't know why.
Right.
They know how to write the rule, but they don't know the reason for it, and then how it affects the rest of the organization and how important it is, and why what was elicited that they had to make that they had to write that rule.
So how much insight and buy-in have you gotten from vendors and software providers and PLC owners and end users, and talk a little bit about that? Because I mean, for me, building labs and that's been part of my career along the way in this OT journey is building labs. But it's exciting to me to see this because I see how much is needed in this space, and I want people to understand how valuable this is as a tool and forwarding this OT cybersecurity initiative that we need. Yeah.
Well, so I founded the company almost 5 years ago, and we started off, I call it, on the old school cybersecurity side, on the data side, knowing we were going to get into the OT side also.
Yeah.
But it's very different. We were prepared to do that. So really over the last, I guess, 2 years ago, we really jumped into the OT side.
Right.
And with that, there are a lot of differences, and I'll get into those in a minute. But the receptiveness by the industry is unbelievable, and it's funny because we just did a formal launch of one of our products last week, and we held off. We've had that product for a really long time, but we were really worried because we said, "Oh gosh, the floodgates are going to open," because the thing on the OT side is that for the end users, so for our customers, whether they're utilities or pharmaceutical companies or manufacturing companies, or even on banks, all of them, everyone suffers from the talent shortage and the experience shortage, no doubt about that. And so nobody doesn't need to practice cyber defense. But what's so unique about this is that it really enables organizations to craft their own experience based on whatever their industry is, how their team is structured, what tools they use. So you were asking about some of the vendors. So in our range, we have licenses for all of the usual suspects, and including Industrial Defender.
Right.
And any tools that our customers are using can be configured into that environment for their simulation exercises. And so you've heard the phrase "train like you fight." Yep. That applies to 3 areas: people, process, and technology.
Yep.
And to mimic technology, very important. So that's why we partner with all the technology companies that our customers and the market in general is using, so that they are accessing those tools in the range. So we love those partnerships and really appreciate them. And our customers do too, obviously.
Sure.
And then, so that's technology. And then process, we want to be able to ensure that people are practicing on their own playbooks and run books. And then people has to be mimicked in the sense that people have to train as a team if that's how cyber defense happens. I already talked about that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
But people, process, and technology all have to be mimicked for simulation to be effective. And so that's what makes this very unique, is that organizations are able to be proactive otherwise they used to be just, crossing their fingers and hoping that either something didn't happen to them or that if it did, they'll figure it out that day. And we all know how that goes because we see it
quickly,
on every day.
And nothing really bad happens when it does, right?
Right. And this is, as you know, this is cyber safety. This isn't just about protecting data. This is protecting lives and our liveliness, livelihoods. And so it's taken very seriously. Not that data security isn't taken seriously, but there are added elements that make OT security, as a lot more complex, not just from a technical standpoint, but organizationally, there's a lot of challenges in companies of who owns it. Yeah. And that's another area that we see a lot.
Yeah, and understanding those differences and where those demarcation lines are and who owns it and who's responsible. And so do you see a lot of people coming in that aren't cyber people that are plant engineers or operators or those folks that normally wouldn't be in a cyber role?
Yeah.
But they're part of the conversation because they're the guys or gals that run the control systems at the power plants or on the manufacturing line. And they need to be part of that bigger team to understand how to respond in that scenario that the cyber, the firewall and all those other things that are cyber, but there's that big piece of this that's operational that those are part of the bigger team of a cyber response.
Yes. And so those people are definitely part of the exercises, and I am happy to say more and more so.
That's good.
Very pleased with that.
Yeah.
There's still a long way to go, but a lot of these people, and I may be making a generalization, but a lot of them have been in their jobs for a long time.
Yep.
And it's not, such a moving the career role type of thing like cyber.
Yeah.
And so they've been in their jobs a long time. They may be set in their ways.
Yep.
They may report up to the COO, and then cyber is somebody else's job. And they may or may not know how to spell cyber.
Right.
They just know it's something with computers. But what has to happen is that these plant managers and anyone on that side of it, the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
And so, in general, in the cyber world, you talk about security awareness. It's more about people knowing not to click on a phishing email.
Right.
But on the OT side, we see cyber awareness as just fundamentally getting these folks to understand that, yes, when you see that temperature gauge go up and you turn it down, you need to think about the fact that may not be actually going up. That might be a cyber attack.
Yeah.
And just knowing at least awareness as a first step. And so that's the first step. And then the other thing that we're seeing more and more of slowly but surely is the integration of OT and IT, cyber defense and SOCs, and companies leveraging their IT SOC for OT, but knowing that there's a lot of differences. They can't take the same ways that they can't do the same thing that they've been doing on the IT side and apply it to OT, but they're trying to leverage those assets.
So I've seen that a lot, and there's a big debate around, should I have a dedicated OT SOC or have a combined OT and IT SOC with OT heads sitting in the IT SOC or the overall SOC. But at the end of the day, the same thing I've said when I was a consultant, the same thing I've said to CISOs and CSOs and multiple C-suite folks is, it doesn't really matter how the organization works as long as they're talking to each other. And that's the key, right? Is I can't take an IT analyst and expect him to understand what is going on in OT world, and I can't respond to an OT incident the same way that I would an IT incident, because people's lives are at risk. There's safety concerns. There's all sorts of other things to consider that on IT. When I have an incident in an IT world, I isolate the device, I reboot the system, I kick it off the network. Those are easy things to do. I can take action, no problem. I can change the firewall rule on the fly. And the worst thing is I get Bob calling me from accounting saying I can't get to SharePoint, right, or my email. The implications on an OT world are a lot different. So I love to hear that you've got the operational folks in those meetings. Because that communication and understanding of their role in that, and that they're key. They really are, in my opinion, the key to us being successful in a response in the OT space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And they have, the conversation just has to be started in companies for the integration. It's just, they have separate goals, data integrity versus uptime.
Right.
And like you said, you can't have an IT analyst who is trying to understand and respond to an OT attack because, they may not see anything wrong with taking it down for a few minutes. So, well, that's not just money when the pipeline stops, but there can be lives at risk too.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of awareness. There's a lot of basic training. And then, of course, there's the more technical training that is required to understand the different types of attacks, which are, we both know they're getting a lot more complex. And, people have to know what they're looking for before they can know how to respond to that too.
So what is a customer? Let's say that I'm a manufacturing company and I've got an IT SOC that's combined with my OT. What does it look like to engage with Cloud Range? Is it a one-time come through, bring my team? Is it a quarterly? Kind of walk us through what that scenario looks like.
Most of our customers are doing about one simulation a month, and each simulation is a different attack. Yeah. So think about it like going to the gym. Yeah. So once you're going to be a little sore, you're going to think, oh my God, I need to do that more often.
That was painful.
Right. 3 times a week, not bad, not as good as 5 times a week, but still better than none. Yes. And so most of our customers are doing one a month because it's a rhythm. And in fact, they look forward to it. This isn't a training where a lot of people go into trainings and they roll their eyes like, oh, I have to go do this to check a box. They look forward to it. Yeah. Because they are digging around in a network. They have root access to every single thing in a full enterprise network. Sure. They can't break anything. Right. And they really look forward to it because they can mess up. And we encourage them to be risky and learn from it and communicate a lot. And they really do look forward to it. In fact, at the end of every simulation, we get feedback from our customers and, just short of 100% say this makes them better at their job. And it actually helps with their job satisfaction as well. And so with such a shortage of people and with all the churn of people, companies really need to focus on retaining their employees. So anything that they can do to engage them more and make them better at their jobs, obviously while protecting the company and protecting society at that, for that matter, is going to really help them. So, man, that really makes me think about obviously continuing education. I as a consultant and having my CSSP and all those things, like I have to check these boxes and make sure I'm, advancing my intellect around all of this. So imagine instead of just reading a white paper, which is valuable, and listening to a podcast like this one, for instance, but actually doing hands-on exercises to not only test it but prove and find things that I messed up on or that I missed, and then do it again and see if I stump my toe in the same place again and get thrown curveballs all the time and have a better understanding. That's powerful to be able to respond in the future as I see these. And I'm not so shocked when I do, right? Yeah. And it's also great for the people who are going through the simulation training because they get badges for what the attacks are that they've accomplished. So we use various frameworks, including the MITRE ATT&CK framework, to build the attacks out. And so they can get badges and certificates on all these different ones. And obviously that is going to help them do not just the badge, but I mean, they're accomplishing these. They're just going to be that much more prepared for what's to come in the future. And they're very, they really look forward to it. It's something that they hear about things, but they've never actually seen it, and they can really get their hands dirty on it. Yeah, it's one thing to do it in a lab I build at home or read about it or watch a YouTube video, but seeing it hands-on and responding and seeing how fast it or how long it takes or how quickly things pivot and all that's powerful. Yeah. So what about the training aspect? So I'm a new person that has zero cyber experience, or I'm wanting to I'm in IT and I want to get into OT. Like, do you guys offer that level of training to give people that, beyond just being a certified
paper MCSE type to actually get some experience hands-on so they could get a job in OT without having that job in the first place.
Yeah. So we've got a few different types of trainings. So primarily it is B2B. So our customers are, businesses and governments and higher education. But within those, especially with the skill shortage, a lot of organizations are recruiting from within. They may be taking somebody from marketing into cybersecurity and training them. And so we have all of the learning paths for somebody to go from zero to hero, where they may know nothing. We've got different skills exercises called Flex Labs, where it's all just individual training, skills development, and for different areas, different certification prep. But then they get onto the range, which is the full-blown live fire attacks. That's where they can apply all of that stuff and do the different scenarios and get accomplish each of those. So there's also, if somebody is moving into a new role, they can use the range to show what they have done too. We have a really cool product called Fast Track, and it's I'll go back to a sports analogy. So it's like game film. And so instead of somebody applying for a job and saying, okay, I have this cert and this many years of experience and this is what I've done, it's actually it's proof on the cyber range of what they've done and the thought processes that they've made throughout an exercise. And those exercises are done specific to or for specific jobs. And so, a SOC analyst or a forensics examiner, they can go through those and show a potential employer what they've done, and they can actually see that versus just, have a great interview and have an okay resume.
Right. No, that's powerful, because that's the proof behind what my resume says. And, maybe I'm a good interviewee, or maybe I'm not as great of an interviewee.
Yes.
When I've got that data behind me that shows it from an, independent third party that proves what I've done. I'm not just talking about it. I'm coming to the table with it. That's awesome. So what does it look like for that person that's changing careers? Maybe you talked about marketing to a SOC analyst. Like, what's the time frame on something like that? Like, what is the investment from a company from a time perspective of that person to get from, where they are? And I know it's going to be dependent upon the person and how much time they can dedicate to it. But overall, what does that trajectory look like?
Yeah, I mean, it like you said, it definitely depends. There are, we've got one program that's a fast start for SOC analysts, and it can, it's 4 months or 6 months, but they're working at the same time.
Sure.
So they're doing it in parallel with their job, and they're hitting certain milestones and going through different attack simulations over that time. But then it's, that's the point where they've gone through all the fundamentals, and probably at the end of it have a lot more experience than a lot of their peers, because they're actually seeing these attacks versus people who have just heard about them.
No, that's awesome. Because if you think about a normal hiring process right now with background checks and everything else, it could take that long to hire an external candidate anyways, by, putting out job postings and going through background checks. And so if I could take an interested party that's already inside of my company, invest in that person 4 to 6 months and turn them into a SOC analyst, that's a huge win for them. They're already going to be loyal because they're already inside and they have the, the knowledge of inside, and I just built them up and promoted them in. So no, that's super powerful. Yeah.
And one fun aspect of this, I've really been excited when we see it in action, is that we have an assessment different than the Fast Track assessment. It's called Right Track. And so if you take somebody who has never been in cyber, everyone is born with certain things that they're really good at.
Yeah.
And aptitudes. And they may not have any training, but in cyber, there are over 50 different work roles. And just because you're good at one doesn't mean you'd be good at another, regardless of your training. It's just, what is your innate capabilities? And so the Right Track assessment is a cognitive assessment for anybody. So it could be, you could take it, a 10th grader can take it, somebody in marketing can take it. And it's think of, it's a lot of brain tests, patterns and shapes and, but using different parts of the brain. And you don't need to know anything about cyber for it. But what it does, the results show different areas of aptitude, and then those are mapped to very specific roles in cyber. And in those roles, here is the training that you need to have to succeed in that role. So it goes from somebody not having nothing to do with cyber to putting them on the right track so they're set up for success. Because, what do people think when they want to get into cyber? What do they think that job is?
Right. Hacking.
They think it's, exactly, because of what they see on television.
Right.
But there are so many other roles, and not everyone would be a good hacker or a pen tester.
Right.
So this sets them up for success, especially people that are career changers, because they may say, well, I'm in marketing. Well, how can I get into cyber? And this assessment shows that they're actually innately set up to be successful in a very specific role in cyber. So it's amazing. It's really making a dent in that talent shortage.
So what about one of the things that I hear a lot around is insurance, right? So cyber ranges or cyber insurance policies, lowering risk, all this kind of thing. And a lot of the insurance companies are struggling to say, how do I insure my end user? Because they may or may not know, they may not have an asset inventory. They may not understand, like they tell me they're doing all these things. They've got a policy that says these, but how do I know they're doing it? All that kind of stuff. Have you guys gotten into kind of insurance and providing that proof around my SOC analysts are getting time experiencing in this that as a proof for an underwriter?
Yeah. So we're actually in April, we're going to be launching a new risk dashboard.
Okay.
That takes all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are prescribed by the NIST NICE framework and turns it into a risk score.
Yeah.
And so the risk score is based on what competencies the people in that company have and maps it against what they should have. And there's all sorts of different weights and algorithms behind it with the, so it's really a risk metric, because if you, going back to people, process, and technology, a lot of risk scores are measured by technology or about technology, about processes or compliance, but never has risk been measured in terms of, you've got these 50 people, they only know half of what they should, and therefore you're exposed.
Yep.
So this is going to quantify that, and ultimately for the purpose of obviously mitigating risk, but then that can apply to insurance companies also, because it's really hard to standardize testing for cyber talent. It's different when you go get insurance, car insurance or homeowners insurance, and all you need to do is check a box that says you have an alarm system and your insurance goes down. It's very different. But the people side has not been measured in the past, so we're really excited about that. And then there's also frameworks. So we're working with a nonprofit called BCS, Building Cybersecurity. They're creating a framework, an OT framework for buildings and facilities that ultimately will serve the same purpose, because organizations don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be creating a cyber range specifically around that as well.
Oh, that's outstanding. Yeah. So I interviewed Lucian on the podcast as well. So great episode there. So what's something that you're interested in and that you guys are taking into? So you talked about a lot today. What else is on the horizon for OT Cyber and cyber ranges and all that you guys have planned?
So there is so much we're excited about. We're creating ranges for all of the different sectors in critical infrastructure. And so, there's a lot of things that each of them have in common, but we're excited to be able to have specific ranges for each one that can be customized for whatever that sector is. So, whether it's maritime or manufacturing, or aviation, there's a lot on the horizon. So we've got customers in many of those sectors already. And there's just such a focus now not just in the industry, but in the world on OT security, on critical infrastructure. And so we're moving quickly. The demand has been there. We've got some amazing partners and customers in the space already. Yeah. And we're a global company, so we've got customers and partners on almost every continent. And obviously some continents represent they're more heavy in, for example, oil and gas in the Middle East. Sure. So we're doing a lot there. And it's really I am personally really interested in how organizations adapt. My my education is actually in economics and organizational development. And,
Right.
Who knew that this would come about now when I look at OT and IT convergence. But it really is fascinating to see how leaders in the C-suite are discussing this because they can't ignore it. And as much as technology and processes have to be honed and trained, there have to be fundamental organizational changes that happen for this to be successful because, you have the whole, it's not my job. Well, it's not my job.
Right.
And then, what happens as a result of that. So I'm just excited on seeing the evolution. It's slow, but we are helping companies do that, and with some of our partners as well.
Yeah, that it's being seen that it's just a business risk. It's just like any other risk, and it's really, for a long time, cyber, especially in OT, it just was really looked at as a cost center. It was something I had to spend money on. It wasn't providing me value. Why am I doing this? I don't need all this. All those stories around it. I'll disconnect it, and that's enough. And I think we've seen enough of public attacks or publicly announced things that have happened and incidents, and that, a lot of them aren't necessarily, OT attacks, but they impacted the OT. So,
right.
The pipeline and right. all of those, right, is not necessarily are they all OT attacks, but they're impacting OT. And that at the end of the day, it's all we care about is when I turn that light switch on, I want it to work. The system that was attacked, I don't really care about as an end user. I just want the power to work. I want the gas to work. I want my groceries to be there. When I order Amazon, I want my package to show up, right? So overall understanding from a message perspective in the public knowledge, from a C-suite executive to understand and be able to classify this as a risk to my business. And how do I get better? It's not just buying a widget. Some of that people, process, and technology, I can't forget about those people. And giving them the knowledge and training without waiting for something to break, right? I want them to go get those reps in a safe environment before it happens. So when it does happen, they know how to respond in a quick manner.
Right. And they are your biggest asset in the technology stack are the people.
And the biggest risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what about compliance? I know you guys, I don't think you guys really focus on that, but from a compliance perspective, there's another avenue there from people to be able to test out policies and response. Again, not proving compliance, and that's not what I mean, but more around the actions around a compliance program and just going through steps of how do I get this firewall rule or whatever the compliance requirement is. Is that something that you guys have looked at or thought about from a training perspective?
Yeah, a lot of our customers come to us, maybe initially because they have to do 2 tabletop exercises a year,
right?
For example, to be in compliance.
Yeah.
That then leads to us saying, well, tabletop exercises are just paper-based. They don't tell the whole story.
Right.
But when you integrate a range and actually see an attack happening and have the people who have to be there to detect it and respond to it, and then also the decision makers who have to figure out what the heck they're going to do and say as a result of this, getting everyone in the room together is so much more powerful. So that solves for compliance a lot, and then also gets our customers to be able to say, whoa, there's a whole lot more to this than just, a PowerPoint exercise and us coming out of the room saying, oh gosh, we didn't really know what we were doing.
Right.
And also something you said a minute ago about the, you alluded to, just people in organizations resisting the integration of IT and OT.
Right.
People resist things when they don't understand them.
Sure.
And so the first step is just getting people to see what this is and how it can happen. They don't need to be technical.
Sure.
People are really scared of technology if they're not technical. And so they just will ignore some of the risks. But if you can get them in a room and show them in layman's terms, this is how it can happen. And they may be looking at a screen of alerts and IP addresses and such, but if they can understand it in a way that they, can then respond and react, that's really the first step, because they just don't get it. And that's kind of back to the whole awareness portion. People just don't know what they don't know.
Right. So I just came back from DC a while back and meeting with congressmen and senators and different folks, and we're talking about NERC and compliance and a lot of these. And you just talked about a tabletop exercise. It seems like we need to be getting this message out that tabletop exercises are great, but that's like bringing a horse and cart when we've got cars and way more capable technologies. Is that something you guys are pushing or having those conversations of, hey, NERC and all these regulatory entities, have you thought about doing this type of training that will move the ball forward without pushing a whole bunch of requirements upon these small to medium-sized businesses that don't have a huge budget? There's a whole bunch of value in just training your people out of those three, people, process, and technology. I know we keep going back to that, but the regulations seem to focus on the people and process over the technology, where, again, I think our biggest risk as well as the easiest to benefit is by training our people. Is that something you guys are pushing or having those conversations?
We are. And the first step there is really just, as I mentioned, the awareness piece and establishing the difference between a traditional tabletop exercise and using Cloud Range or a range, something that's a true simulation versus just a discussion. There are a lot of organizations, if they're smaller and they don't have, there's a lot of utilities, local utilities, they don't even have somebody in cybersecurity. They may have somebody who says, well, I guess I do cyber. If something happens, I guess that's my job. Some is better than none. Kind of back to the gym analogy.
Yep.
So anything that we can do to train them based on where they are. And when I say where they are, what is their skill and experience level, if any, and just start with whatever that is, because everyone's going to be different. But the fact of the matter is, especially with all these utilities, that's where huge amounts of risk are. And even if they don't have the budget, some is better than none. They have to understand what they're looking for, what can happen, and just initially just be aware of it. And then, all the way from them to, nuclear power companies that we work with who have very advanced teams, and everyone in between. It's so valuable because nobody will ever dispute the value of practice, muscle memory, and situational awareness. And it is absolutely necessary in cybersecurity. Awesome.
So what is the one thing that you're most excited about or looking forward to over the next 5 to 10 years in this journey of cybersecurity, OT, IT, kind of this big thing that this elephant we're trying to take bites out of?
Well, in terms of a big, hairy, audacious goal, we aspire to make simulation training a standard and a requirement. Because if you think of any life safety field, emergency management, firefighting, military, all of those require some sort of simulation, or medical. All of them require some sort of simulation training before you can actually do that job. And cybersecurity, and even more specifically OT security, this is A, it's modern warfare. B, this is the epitome of life safety. And so having standards for people to get a job and do a job is absolutely one of our big goals. And we're working toward that. So I'm really excited about that.
No, that's huge. And I can see that being a very large impact on the space from an awareness, from a bringing more and more. We know how many seats, how many people and empty seats we have, and how many we need to get trained up to be able to protect all that we have in this country, from a critical infrastructure, from a just being able to, we saw during COVID how, everything wasn't available, like toilet paper and just basic things that we took, we took it as it was going to be available anytime we needed it. That didn't work out for us all the time. So having that protection in this, and that we can continue to do business in an OT way, and be able to drive the economy and do things safely and effectively.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome.
So, a lot on the horizon.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to it. Seeing you at S4. I think you guys are going to be at S4, right?
We will be there. Yep, I'm looking forward to it. We're holding about 3 days of Capture the Flag events, so look for Cloud Range there, and I will see you there for sure.
Absolutely.
with the rest of your folks at Industrial Defender. So thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Absolutely. Anything else? How would people get a hold of you if they're interested? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So CloudRange's website is www.cloudrangecyber.com. You can also check us out on LinkedIn and all the other socials. And I was told to say that,
Absolutely.
I feel like I know it now. And, feel free to ping us from our website or shoot an email over to info@cloudrangecyber.com. And we can get you a demo. We love doing those and show you how a live attack happens.
Awesome. Well, look forward to seeing S4. Thanks a lot, Debbie.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.